The first remark I'd like to make is that there is no human activity which doesn't have an impact on the environment.
There is over 100,000 of nuclear workers around the world. Right now there's 32 countries that has nuclear power plant, 440 reactors.
موقف أكسفام من الطاقة النووية ومن طاقات الوقود الأحفوري هو موقف واضح. إحنا بنطالب بالانتقال العادل للطاقة.
The nuclear industry has a long way to go when it comes to gender equality.
Talking about how to ensure that decisions about energy are made in a way that reflects international environmental law and international human rights law.
I'm based in Canada, Toronto, working in a company that has 10 nuclear power plants.
So a very, very small amount of uranium can power a very, very large amount of energy as compared to something like coal or natural gas.
Once I started working, I realized the benefit that nuclear energy provides to the environment and to the economy and to the community.
If you take nuclear energy, of course it doesn't, when it functions, it doesn't emit CO2 nor other greenhouse gases. Now you still need to build them, so there is some emissions associated with the building of the plants. But when they work, they produce nuclear waste.
الانتقال العادل للطاقة معناته إنه كل العالم لازم يتجه لطاقته المتجددة. للطاقة المتجددة كل دولة حسب قدرتها المادية.
We need to put pressure to our government, to all the developed countries, to push to transit to renewable energy, clean energy. This is our main demand.
وأهم إشي إنه يكون الهارت بهذا السولوشن أو بقلب هاي الحلول هو إشي كتير مهم، العدالة الاجتماعية.
We know that we need to transition away from fossil fuels, the primary cause of climate change, and that causes massive human rights violations, impacting people's rights to health, their right to food, their right to housing, their right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment.
Because the cost of nuclear energy, the cost of building nuclear plants has strongly increased after Chernobyl in 1986 and Fukushima in 2011.
السيستم اللي احنا فيه، السيستم الرأسمالي اللي احنا فيه، السيستم الذكوري اللي احنا فيه ما بزبط نحل مشكلة التغير المناخي بنفس السيستم. فأنا إذا عندي هذا السيستم الرأسمالي اللي بتسيطر عليه أصحاب النفوذ، الأغنياء المليارديرات اللي بيستعملوا السوبر ياختس واللي بيستعملوا البرايفت جيتس تبعونهم، وأكسفام طلعت كتير تقارير هدول المليارديرات 90 دقيقة من حياتهم بالإميشنز تبعونهم بتوازي حياتي كاملة أنا من الجلوبال ساوث.
What's being discussed here in the negotiations, one of the primary issues is finance. And I think it's really important that the finance goal that comes out of this process reflects the needs of the people who are most affected by climate change, and that finance is accessible to those people, and that it's mobilized in a manner that respects, protects, and fulfills human rights.
Well, because it's labeled the finance cup indeed, and it's a tie, it's an old tie that my father gave me a long time ago, where the different money symbol, I mean the pound, the yen, the Deutschmark, which doesn't exist anymore because it's replaced by the euro.
Okay, well, someone said it before me, but just to be clear, is this a joke, right? This is totally unacceptable, but this is exactly what we fear will happen here in Baku. After 2 weeks of negotiation, of a very opaque process, we see exactly the text we didn't want to see happening here on the last day of COP.
Meanwhile, wealthier nations are trying to renege on their responsibilities. They're confusing and distracting us with invocations of investment and a whole range of all kinds of sources, and are not committing to a core public finance provision here. And it's unbelievable to see this phrased by 2035. That is 10 years from now. Meanwhile, people are dying right now. They're losing their livelihoods right now. 2024 is once again going to be the hottest year on record. We're seeing an incredible number of climate-fueled, fossil-fueled disasters around the world. And what we see here is wealthy nations caving into fossil fuel interests, protecting their own narrow political agendas, and not delivering for the people on the front lines of this crisis what they need and deserve. This is absolutely an unfair, unscientific basis for negotiations here.
What we need is real money, real climate solutions. I'm trying. Money. Stop turning around. Pay out climate finance. Stop turning around. Pay out climate finance.
Together with wind and solar, it works together to complement, to have a safe, a reliable, and a grid that's very affordable to customers.
From an economic point of view, nuclear energy is not so favorable because it's very, very expensive. Because on the other hand, as the IPCC reports have shown, the cost of renewable energy has continued to fall per megawatt hour produced.
The events you were mentioning about nuclear accident, Chernobyl and Fukushima, which was the two major ones, the industry has learned from those accidents and have evolved in terms of the safety measures inside a nuclear power plant, which myself have worked. There's 5 barriers to contain the radiation, so the radiation is contained within.
Safety is a very important part of the nuclear energy culture, and governments have definitely taken notice of this. Even the international framework for nuclear energy is very contingent on the fact that every single step that we take, it's based on safety of the power plant, of the people working in it, and that we ensure that there are as little disasters as possible. The way that governments do this is to ensure that they have very strong regulations before even they set up their nuclear power plants. Unfortunately, as it stands right now, the nuclear industry has a long way to go when it comes to gender equality. Surveys show that only 20% of the STEM workforce in the nuclear industry is women. 24% of the overall workforce is women, but STEM workforce is a little lower, and especially in leadership positions in the nuclear industry, women are not as well represented in senior leadership roles. And I think it's essential for the nuclear industry, if it wants to expand, that it maintains a diverse pool of talent amongst its midst, and gender diversity is one of the most critical elements of this, to bring different perspectives and different lived experiences of women and people from all sort of minorities into leadership positions.
الانتقال العادل للطاقة معناته أنه كل العالم لازم يتجه لطاقته المتجددة. للطاقة المتجددة كل دولة حسب قدرتها المادية، وأهم إشي أنه يكون الهارت بهذا السولوشن أو بقلب هاي الحلول هو إشي كتير مهم، العدالة الاجتماعية. فإذا كان عندي أنا موظفين معينين بيشتغلوا بهدول الطاقة الغير متجددة أو اللي يتم ترويج لها كطاقة متجددة، هدول أنواع الطاقات سواء طاقة نووية أو غيره، لازم الدولة ولازم المؤسسات تلاقي بديل لهدول الناس عشان ما يخسروا شغلهم، لأنه العدالة الاجتماعية هي الأهم.
The tax is unacceptable, and coming from a developing country in Africa, I think that this is totally a joke, and it's really unacceptable, and it doesn't really reflect what communities who have sent us here really want to see. What we want is climate justice, and climate justice really does not really entail the joke that we see in that text.
The climate justice movement is a movement composed of all of society, of all kinds of different people, but all with a common interest in ensuring that the climate is protected and the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, of which a safe and stable climate is a critical element, can be enjoyed by all people. You mentioned technology, and I'd like to say at the outset that all people have the right to benefit from scientific progress and its applications. That is a human right protected under the International Covenant of economic, social, and cultural rights?
That's a really good question. In fact, there are a lot of international forums. The IAEA is one, the OECD has a nuclear energy agency. There's another forum called IFNAG that ensure that best practices from around the world are shared between countries that have the same vision of expanding nuclear energy.
We see that as a principle within the Paris Agreement, reflected within the Paris Agreement, but the actual action that's being taken right now, so far to date, under the Paris Agreement is insufficient to reach the objectives of the Paris Agreement. We need much higher ambition.
الطاقة النووية، طاقة الوقود الأحفوري هم طاقات غير نظيفة.
The comparison between the cost of renewable and the cost of nuclear energy is not in favor of nuclear energy.
We have a lot of uranium in the world right now, and the International Atomic Energy Agency also is overseeing how much we have to make sure we can provide the power for 100+ years.
Even if you put away for a little bit the question of nuclear waste, which is an important question, of course, from an economic point of view, it's probably better today to focus on renewable energy and energy efficiency than on nuclear energy, except maybe where there are plants operating in a safe manner already, because there the investments have been made already.
And you know that this COP is not only about numbers, it's also about quality. I don't know if you looked for some quality in the text, there is none. No mention of grant-based component, no additionality. And when you don't have additionality, in practice, it means that you divert budget from ODA budget, where we have extremely important needs in developing countries. We don't have clear mention of a definition. We've been asking for this for decades. I mean, we're in 2024 and we still don't know what climate finance truly is.
Maybe I'll remind that as the IPCC has written, that the money is available, not only on my tie.
And we want this to be public grants, not loans that will further us into poverty because of this climate crisis.
The difficulty is not to find the money, it's to orient the money in the proper way so that the environment, climate and the well-being of people are protected and promoted.